things come up and I know how I feel about that, and I'm not saying, I don't know. What is that? There's no question. I can clear it up for myself.
So when you say figuring out who I am, the I, is it a mind-body connection? Is it your body functioning? What is the I? You talk about breaking it down.
This question.
This is my job.
I get it. I'm feeling it. I'm just like, wow. When I teach spiritual philosophy, I say that when I say I, that includes the ego that's experiencing the physical realm. That includes the body that's experiencing the physical realm. And that also includes a higher self, an inspired self. And that I has all of those things. And so that's what I seek to develop. So if I bring myself into the present moment and I start to feel a disconnect from my body, that's the I that's happening right now. And so then I question myself, the I, why are you feeling a disconnect? And the I will answer that question. Now, my ego may not understand the answer. And so my work is to get the ego to be okay with not knowing, seeking, questioning, figuring it out. And once the ego understands, then there's a presence that comes through. It's like when I put on the music in yoga, that's like a trigger for me to drop into the I. And I'm just, because people ask me sometimes, like, do you choreograph your sequence? It's like, I may say to myself, like, oh, they're ready for crow, or they're ready for this, but I'm not choreographing. It's a present moment. So for me, what literally happens is I always start the same warm-up because that gets the body warm. And then I'll hear, okay, lunge next. And then I'll hear, oh, you need to do the twist. You need to do the twist with the open arms. And so then I work that into the sequence. I'll do it. Then I'll hear, oh, balancing is the one. We got to do balancing today. And so to me, if I'm teaching a class and I'm not hearing that, then I'm not present.
This is so good to hear because this is how I work on my interviews.
Good!
I always start the same and end the same, but in between, because you have a lot of preparation, but you don't need to write down 1, 2, 3,
right.
4, 5.
Right.
Right? It doesn't mean that you don't prepare. It's because you prepare with your life.
Yes.
And then you're able to live it and give it.
Yes.
And share it.
Yes.
With
and if there's
class.
something that comes up in class that I find that I have difficulty doing, I'll just practice it. And then when I'm teaching, again, people don't think that I go through difficulty. I'm literally teaching from what I was struggling with. And so when I talk about balance, like this thing that's not static, is because I know that feeling of trying to do that tree pose and wanting so much to stay still. It's like you can't do it. It's not that you can't do it. It's just, it's not possible for that to be perfect every time. The trees don't even do that.
Right.
And so when I'm speaking, I'm really pulling from the struggle that I had doing that, because there was a point where my foot couldn't come off the ground. Like standing on one foot was too much. I remember that feeling. I remember that sensation very clearly. So when I look up and see people struggling, I know exactly what to say, because you're going through exactly what I went through. It doesn't have to be there. Does it make sense?
I think that's probably why people feel so loved and accepted in your class, because you show that and then you say that and you share with people it's normal what you're going through, because you have been through the same thing, and it's okay. The tree doesn't need to be perfect.
It's perfect in its own self. It makes itself perfect.
Yes, it makes it's perfect in its own self.
It's in the act of creation. And we are also in that act of creation. And that's why I'm seeking to thrive, to tap into that power, to tap into manifesting a lived experience, so that, I mean, when I heard that trans women died at 35, that was their life expectancy. I mean, at the time I was 40, I'm like, then they never got to live.
Do you know why?
Social issues, difficulty transitioning, a lot of times I feel that trans people are under so much stress that their body, like, they're under so much stress just because they realize what's going on, and then some of them are doing medical things to help them through that process, and that's another stress. And there are very few spaces that they can go back to be safe, which is another stress. It's like there's all of these things that are stressing just for them to be who they are. You know, a person who does medical transition, to me, is a warrior. They are a goddess. They are beyond, because the amount of things that they've gone through to get to where they are, that should show them how incredibly powerful, transformative they are, because it's a lot. And so when I heard that, I thought, I'm not going to leave this realm without making an impact. We sing praises of Martin Luther King because he did that. He left an impact. Malcolm X left an impact. Rosa Parks they weren't trying to do that. They were just in the state of being. And they are remembered. And I'm saying, as a queer person of color, I want to be remembered. I want to be remembered. I don't want half of my story. That's not a remembrance. I want to be remembered for all of me, because history is the way it is. Like, we don't know if people are queer or not. It's really an assumption. We don't know, because when we write the story, we don't write that. And so that person is not truly remembered. And so how can future generations grow from a place that they're not even being remembered from? That rooting and that remembrance is being taken away. It's like slavery. I can say, I'm not going to speak for anybody else, I'm going to speak for myself. As a black person who is a descendant of slaves, that's the truth. My great-grandmother, who died in 1994, so I grew up with her, Granny, was born in 1894, meaning her parents were enslaved. And so my whole life, there was a disconnect from that. And part of the thing that I'm trying to do now is to honor. Yes, it was a horrible thing. I'm not here to validate. I'm here to honor that their perseverance, their power, their strength, their unsquashable spirit is in my genes. They were survivors. They had a power to survive. That power is in my genes. And so I need, part of coming into my I, to my beingness, is to say, you're the descendant of slaves. That's something that's real, that happened, that you are now the product of. And claiming that power helps me navigate my world. Helps me to recognize what's really happening. It's a power. That teaching. So now I can grow from that rootedness. And now future generations can grow from this new awareness. And so I'm trying to apply that to all of the cultures, sub or not, whatever, however people want to determine that feed into my DNA, that are a part of my beingness. And I feel like if we can all do that, Because I think sometimes when people speak to me, they don't realize that they're talking to someone who's the descendant of a slave. They don't realize the level of discrimination that my parents, their parents, my uncles, my aunts, my cousins have gone through before I even got here. And I wasn't even recognizing that. I was trying to be something else. And so now that I am working on taking in all of me, that requires me to drop into deeper levels of acceptance, to heal some of the remnants of slavery that's still inside of me. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. Not to demean, but when I was growing up, they had to create laws to integrate high schools. Like, that happened when I was in school. And when I hear people have rhetoric as if this thing is so far in the past, and I'm like, my great-grandmother, who I grew, like, it's still too close for me. And I want to create a space where our future generations, future queer people, future people of color, of any experience of human on the planet, has a root to grow from. So that in the future, there are people looking back for inspiration. Like, I can look back to Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass for inspiration, to understand myself, to know why things are happening. And I need queer people to have the same, to have real people that they can reach back to where there is no question. It's clear. And then now this root is grown that they can grow and nurture.
You talk about the descendant of slaves, and I feel what you're doing now is to helping more people coming out of slavery.
Yes.
Mentally,
yes.
Spiritually,
yes.
Physically,
yes.
How to live.
Yes. Yes, all of us. Because the experience that happened to the Africans in what we call America is just one experience, right? Most, I'm going to say most, but the majority of cultures that came here had to go through something similar. And I find that sometimes I'm confused when I'm talking to people when I'm like, it's like someone will say, I'm Irish. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, Irish people went through the same thing we went through. It's like the famine that happened in Ireland was because England took the potatoes. It wasn't a famine because the potatoes weren't growing. It's like y'all didn't have it to eat. And so I see a correlation, I see a connection, but this modern person is not connecting to that. And I feel like we all have this healing that we need to do. Even the English, everybody. It's not, I picked that one situation because it's a clear situation, but everybody, we all came from indigenous culture that got colonized. And I'm not saying to demean this new world we're in. What I'm saying is recognize your indigenous roots. Celebrate that. Bring that to the forefront. Let that lead you forward. Let that be a part of your journey of self-exploration. Because I can't say I am if I don't accept what came forward. It's impossible.
When you were describing, I thought about the recent conversation I had with my father. So, I left a comfortable corporate job to do my own startup. And to him is risky business. You're throwing yourself into the wild world. What if you don't have anything to eat? And I feel a lot of time parents are trying to protect their kids. And that is a lot of the conflict, whatever is rising. And the reason why I mention that is when we are coming out into the world to be who we are, do you ever have fear about, fear? What I'm trying to convey is you know, as animal in the wild, they have fear to be eaten. And maybe we human beings somehow have that as well, is being afraid and being embarrassed. And then I think that's also connected to the idea of fitting in. For example, I remember when I was a kid, if my mom takes me somewhere, she'll tell me, oh, do this, otherwise other people will see you. And then like that's embarrassment, that's fear of fitting in. How do you think about this emotion, this idea of fear?
I like that you thought about the animals. And the way that I observe that is that I don't think animals, I know this is my human brain conceptualizing, so don't come for me, but I don't know if animals look at fear as something that's unnatural. I think that as humans, we can be conditioned to look at fear as something that's unnatural. When I first started transitioning myself, my mind, all of that stuff, that was one of the first emotions that I had to deal with, because I recognized that fear of being seen as the other forced me to make decisions that were not in alignment with who I am. And so when I started to dive into who I really am, the thing that I started doing is when fear shows up, that's the place that I go, because I found that when fear showed up, I was behind that. And then as I started working through that, I tried to make fear a part of my being. So when I teach, like that's one of the things that karate people will say is like, you got to be fearless. And again, I'm not trying to demean anyone, but to me, that sounds very strange, because a person who is fearless jumps off a building. A person who is fearless doesn't fear getting hit by that car. A person who is fearless is not thinking about their own life. So when I teach, I'm like, it's not that you don't, it's not about being fearless. It's about recognizing that fear is a part of your life and choosing not to let it debilitate you. And so if fear shows up, it's like coming here to do the interview as a person who's fearful of telling my truth, and the response to that, I had to talk myself through the fear. So it was nice when you were like, I'll meet you at 11. I'm like, oh, it's great. I'll get to the park. I'll, come to myself. And most of the stuff was really just saying to myself, like, you're just fear of, your internal process is so used to stopping yourself from coming to the surface. And so it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to speak your truth. Just to nourish myself through the fear. The fear doesn't go away. It's a part of me. It's telling me I'm entering into danger zone. It's telling me something bigger is unseen. Fear is a communicator. It's a way that it's communicating something to me. And because in nature, when a dog gets afraid, that dog's fear is communicating something to the human that they're afraid. And so, but the dog get afraid and then start snapping, and they'll say the dog is aggressive. It's like, that's a umbrella term for what's really going on. Like, what really happened in the moment? Oh, the dog was afraid. And so, yeah, it snapped at you because that's what happens. And so then when kids come to class, and it's their first class, I can tell how the parent coached them to get ready for class. Because generally, they'll start crying. It's a fear response. They're afraid because something unknown is about to happen, and the parent explained it to the best of their ability, but it did not prepare the child for the unknown, because sometimes you can't prepare for the unknown. And so when that fear shows up, I just let it be fearful. And then I'm going to say to the child all the things that I would have wanted someone to say to me as a child. It's okay. You're going to be fine. I'm not going to leave your side. I'll be with you this whole time. Just stand next to me. Take a breath. If you cry, you cry. It'll be okay. Do you need me to hold you? Why don't you come help me? Like, I do all the things not to get them to stop being fearful, but to help them move through the situation. And then I find, it's like this thing I'm describing just recently happened. I was working with a 3-year-old, and the first 2 classes that I worked with them, they were on the brink of tears. They didn't really cry, but because, and what the child, they're 3, what the child was saying was like, it's too hard for me to do jumping jacks. I'm like, you're 3, for real? Are you 3? You sound 45, but okay. It's too hard for me to lift my leg up. And I'm like, okay, it's hard. Yes, it's hard. But when I approached it from that training that I've been just developing, and then the last time they came to class, which was yesterday, when I mean they were laughing the whole time, joking with me, it was like this whole thing turned around, because when that fear showed up, I wasn't running away from it. I let it be, because it's a part of nature. I recognize that this child is just being a human, and that they don't have to change anything to be. And over time, it started shifting. And which reflected back to me all the times that I had done that for myself. So when someone says, I need you to come to my party, as a trans person, I go through fear. Because I'm going to be misgendered. There's a whole host of things that I'm going to go through, because I don't present the way that people want a female to present. Not always. And so their fear arises, but then I have to move through that fear. It's like, either I'm going to have a life, or I'm not going to have a life. Does that make sense? It's like, either we're going to do karate, or we're not going to do karate. But your parents want you to do karate, and you're a 3-year-old, so right now, that's what I have to go by. And so then I'm going to help you learn to move through your fear, because I know, I've been working karate for almost 17 years, so I've been in karate long enough to see from child to adult. And I've seen, when there are things that we didn't work through, how it grows and manifests and gets worse as they become older. And so what I did with that 3-year-old is like, I'm looking at a 14-year-old who's going to high school and has to do something new. And so now I'm setting a foundation for them to move through that. Now, they're still going to have a fear response, but their parent is going to have less trouble with that fear response, because when that fear showed up, I didn't demean it. And so the thing that I'm trying to illuminate is, it's okay to be afraid. Fear is not the enemy. It's actually your friend. Because when the truck is coming by and you feel the fear to get out of the way, that fear just saved you. When you're going down the dark street and you can't see in the distance, that fear is saving you. It's real. It's a thing. It's a part of me. It's my friend.
Fear is your friend.
It's part of me. It's part of being, our body is animal. Our brain is human. Our body is animal. It does everything an animal does. We all do the same thing. That's why we're called mammals. We are mammals. Dogs are mammals. Horses are mammals. I was going to say birds. Birds are not mammals. But seals are mammals. Whales are mammals. Like, they all give birth. That's a part of being a mammal. So that means that we are animal. And if animals didn't want to feel fear, then they wouldn't feel fear. If animals didn't feel fear, we would be living in a different world. That would mean that wolves would come and eat humans. That would mean that bugs don't care. Like, that fear pulls them out of our presence. It's a part of nature. And so why are we running away from that?
So fear is actually the reason why we're even able to live this life.
We wouldn't survive if our ancestors didn't have fear. We would all have died out. I'm pretty sure that when there have been many ice ages, that when the land went barren, that fear forced them to move, to learn to cultivate, to cross long land bridges, to survive earthquakes and volcanoes and hurricanes and floods and all of the changes that happen. That fear saved them. So it's a tool. It's just we are being conditioned to ignore it, to act like it doesn't exist, to be seen as being strong. And I feel like a person who is integrating their fear is actually truly strong.
A person who's integrating their fear is actually truly strong.
Because then if you're integrating your fear, you're going to be strong enough to say, I'm scared.
Yeah, this is part of being. And you actually solve my confusion. You know, every morning I send my son to school, he cries. And it's being fear. But something I notice, if a teacher that he's familiar with comes out, he walks over because, even though it's a foreign experience, but there's something that I'm familiar with.
Yes.
Then, and also I think kids have that infinite now.
Yes.
They do.
Yes.
Last minute they don't have chocolate, give them chocolate, immediately, chocolate.
Yes. And I think as an adult, that's hard to recognize because, for example, a child will have a fear response one day and the next day won't. And so the adult will say, the fear's gone. And for me, I say, no, they just didn't have a fear response today. Because when I train teachers to teach in karate, and one of the things I say is, like, when a 2-year-old goes away from class, they haven't been here for 2 weeks, that's like a 7-month break for the 2-year-old. They're in the infinite now. They don't know they haven't been here for 2 weeks. For them, they've been gone forever. And so we literally are going to have to start over. So every time a 2-year-old, every time a child, period, goes away and they come back, we have to start over. The older they get, the less time the starting over lasts. But the younger they are, the greater it is. So when a 2-year-old goes away for Christmas vacation and they come back in January, whatever we did from September to December got deleted. We're looking at a whole new child who reverted back to the child that they had when we were first getting, so we have to start all over again. Adults can be frustrated with that because they remember. And so I try to illuminate this teachers. It's like, your consciousness remembers, but they don't know what that is. I mean, if you're talking about a 5-year-old, let's say a 4-year-old, for them to remember, they would have to learn how to quantify. And I'm like, again, I remember being 4. When did you learn how to quantify? Because I remember when we learned how to quantify. Because math was fun. And then they're like, you got to add these things together. And I'm like, what? It affected me. And so then I'm like, when was that? It wasn't when you were 4. It's like, yeah, that 4-year-old did say 1, 2, 3, 4, but they don't know what that means.
Right. They just remember the sound.
And they know that you are responding happy to that. And so then they're like, but they don't know what that means. And so we as teachers have to remember that. And not because that's the problem with children. We put this thing on them that they're supposed to be an adult when they're just a child. They don't know we are literally a part of them learning. And so for that child to quantify 2 weeks requires 10 years of living. Therefore, literally, they just stopped wearing diapers. They literally are just going to the bathroom almost by themselves. They're not even feeding themselves by themselves. People are still fixing their food. How are they even quantifying 2 weeks? No. Now, if a 3-year-old can do that, then to me that's exceptional. But that's not the norm for a person who lives in the infinite now. And so our job as adults is to try to remember that. But that remembering that cultivates us. It reminds us that we still go through it. It's just we're so used to ignoring that. Instead of being the child, which is going to I'm going to cry because this is scary now. It wasn't scary yesterday, but it's scary now. Whereas an adult may cry because it was scary yesterday and the day before, and now it's the now. It's quantified. Now, as an adult, I can recognize the pattern for a child, but that child may not recognize the pattern the way that I'm recognizing. They're recognizing it through their experience. Does that make sense? And when you said that your child sees somebody that they recognize, that's why that's the thing that changed my whole teaching career. When I realized that if the child needs to feel safe, and then how can a child feel safe if I'm not being myself? Because children know. Children know. They know inauthenticity and they respond to that. And so if I can come in and be myself as much as possible, that's familiar to the child. And then that way, I can help them. That way, when they see my face, even though they do see me as a disciplinarian, there's still a comfort there. They're learning that I'm there to help them. You're not alone.
I think you touch on the fundamental of human being, which is authenticity. That's really valuable. And I feel the same way because my son never likes fake toys. If he wants to play with keys, I buy him a set of fake keys. He wants real keys. He knows that is toy. And you talk about the unbreakable focus. It's like dancing.
Yes.
You know, if you miss a beat, then the music is gone. And that unbreakable focus is also exhausting.
Oh yeah, of course.
How do you relax and so that to make sure you have that unbreakable focus when you need to have it?
I spend a lot of time preparing myself so that I can focus. I spend a lot of time preparing myself, which means that if I'm coming in to teach a class, there are very few things that I'm going to put in my brain. I'm not going to watch the news. Generally, if I'm coming to teach a yoga class, the music that I'm playing is the music that I'm playing in class. I want to become familiar with all the rises and falls. That's my way of starting to get the focus. Like today I was listening to the music and I heard it was You Live, You Learn by Alanis Morissette. And I heard this yelling and I thought it was coming from outside, but when I listened, I'm like, oh, I've never heard this part of the song. I've never heard this but that to me reflects how deeply focused I was, that I was able to pull out something that I'd never heard. So it's a practice so that when I go in, I'm there. But then when the class is over, I completely let it go. I don't, so if I'm teaching karate, I may look at my phone, I may respond to texts, but only to certain people. Like certain people that don't cause a deeper emotional response. Like I try to keep my emotions at a certain level. If I see something that I need to address, it's going to happen after class. Like after the whole class is done. Not in the middle, not shifting when I'm able to sit down and like give it time. So my practice is intense focus and then let it go. But I have an extensive meditation practice, and so that also helps. So that helps me, my meditation practice helps me create like a light switch so that I can go, it's on. Okay, it's off. Does it make sense? So that I can work it when I need to work it. Because everything is in balance, so I don't need to have that kind of focus all the time.
Right.
I don't think being distracted is wrong. I just think that when something needs to be done, less distraction is better. So I work it. It's a skill. I work it. And I keep working it. And in the beginning, it was harder to hold it. And where I am in my practice now, I can hold it for much longer periods of time and for greater amounts of people. So, I mean, I could I just taught a class last week on the west side, and there were like almost 30 people in class, and my focus was there the whole time. And at the end of the class, you know, as I'm evaluating like what happened, like, oh, that happened, I still noticed that my focus was there the whole time. So that, you know, what happened was I was doing the class, and the music became super loud because, you know, I'm using my phone. I'm not an engineer, so I can't really control the volume, and some music creates a bigger sound, and so the music became really loud, but at the moment I couldn't change it. I was in the act of like getting people into a space, and so I had to go. Before like 2 years ago, that would have been hard. It would have been bothering me but I was able to just go back and to finish what I was doing, and then gracefully go over and turn the music down. Before it would have been a panic. They would have picked up on that. And so I can tell that I've really worked my focus to a place where when I need it, I have it, and when I don't, I don't. But it's something that I have to work. I have to train it. I have to exercise it.
So you mentioned you don't read too many news, or you put less thoughts, and you have a meditation, and you spend a lot of time preparing yourself.
Yes.
How does that look like?
Like I will, for example, there are podcasts that I listen to, but they have to be inspirational. They have to be deeply spiritual. I don't have social media, so I don't have that problem. I mean, I do have Twitter.
Yes.
But I am on a Twitter diet, and so I generally only look at Twitter after I'm done with work. You cannot look at anything that's emotionally, mentally triggering for you, right? Because when you walk into class, you need to be focusing on being present. And if it's emotionally triggering, I need to go and focus on that to figure out why it's triggering. So there are very few things that I'll listen to or put into my body that's going to distract me. Like I generally fast before I teach.
Fast, like no food.
Yeah, I haven't eaten yet. I'll eat when I get home because it's distracting. My body is doing this stuff. I feel like I can't go through that. So I don't like to speak in things in restrictions, more as there's a rule that I have to follow. So that when I walk into the class and someone says hi, that hi is genuine. When like my karate teacher will say that I'm very sullen in karate, and when I'm saying it's like I'm not sullen, it's just when I step to teach, I want to be in that space. And so I'm not here to talk about a football game. I'm not here to talk about what happened on this TV show unless I have time, unless it's fun, unless it's funny. I have to be very particular on what I'm engaging in mentally, so that when I need my focus, that focus can go to where I need it to go instead of what is that?
It's like boom, you can be there
immediately.
Yes.
And I say that is because when I'm having challenges with my own transition, I need that focus. I need to pinpoint exactly what's going on, because if I don't, it turns into something much bigger than it needs to be.
This is why I love a hard class. You know, I used to have personal trainers. I had one trainer who always gave me the hardest class because in her class, I have to be focused.
Yes.
Otherwise, I couldn't do any of the moves that she taught me.
Yes.
So
that's why I like vinyasa, because it moves you, it gets you out of the rigmarole, and then you spend all your time kind of catch up with the teacher, and then you realize like I was just focused on that, and there's something wrong with that, because that's the meditation. And then eventually, once you get to know the teacher, you kind of understand their style, you kind of know what they're going to expect from you, and then you can kind of relax into that.
Yes.
But the focus changes. It's not so, it's more loose. It's a looser focus, but it takes time to get there. It takes practice. Like I said, I have to work it. Because I'm extremely sensitive, and so it's like the horse going that way. My body wants to go and look at it. It's like, so I experience it. It's visceral, and I had to learn how to direct my focus, which helps me with special needs kids because I don't always get why they're doing it because I internalize. So my explanation is always going to be different. But I understand that it's pulling you. I feel that. And what I want to help them without changing them, because I don't think that people who have special needs are any less than. They're just different kind of humans. I want them to thrive. And for them to thrive, they have to understand their own sensitivity.
Yes.
And then learn how to master that. So that when they need it, they can pull it. I mean, because technically in 15 years, we're going to have a large adult population who are special needs.
Even the word special needs, a friend of mine is a ballet dancer. She was diagnosed with ADD when she was a child. It was not ADD. She just loves moving. She's a dancer.
Yeah.
It's people with special talents.
Yeah, but they're just humans.
They're just humans.
Yes, I use the word special needs because it helps those who are not as sensitive understand. I try not to use it as a way of derogatoriness because I don't think that they're less than. I just think that their challenges are just different. We have to, I mean, it looks like to me that humans are changing. They're becoming more sensitive. And we have to change with that. And that's going to require new languages. And our language currently now is special needs, neurodivergent. These are our ways to kind of explain this experience. Eventually, they will be the ones coming up with the language. We're just not there yet. Because everything that we're describing, it's even the word queer. It's like that word was something that was given from the outside of the community. And so now we're in a space where people are saying, I'm a non-binary trans woman. I'm like, which sounds like a lot. But that's where we are these people who are having that experience, these queer people are saying, this is what it is. They're creating the language around it. And so I believe that eventually, once this population is larger and more seen by regular, quote unquote, regular people, they're going to start coming up with their own words to describe their own experience instead of us clinically making a diagnosis of where they are.
It's almost like word is being used to explain to the outside.
That's the whole point. The whole point is for the I am. Otherwise, why would we be physical? It's like there's an oak tree, but there are multiple species of oak. There are multiple species of walnut trees. Like you have walnut trees, you got black walnut trees. Like there are multiple species. And they've come down here to experience the individualness of that particular species. Same with human. It's just, we're just moving into the world where the detail is being given to the outside world.
The tree never explains to us.
Doesn't have to. They just are.
Yeah.
We, because of our different experience, can now talk about the experience the tree is giving us. We can say, oh, these are two oak trees, but this is a different type of oak. That's why we are human, coming down to be more particular with what is being expressed. Be more detailed with what is being expressed. And I feel like part of my work that I'm doing is, one, helping people find vocabulary. Two, helping others to carve out spaces. And 3, to help others to recognize that you are a part of something. It's like we can't conceptualize our solar system, but we are a part of the solar system that works in perfect unity. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And that our solar system is part of a greater system. And that system is part of a greater system, and so forth. And so, I mean, these scientific cameras that are out in space are now sending back these. We are being able to view the cosmos in a way that we've never, as a collective of humans. Yes, scientists, but a collective of humans, we're able to look at the universe in a way we've never been able to perceive before. And that to me is just showing me the deeper connection. Like we are waking up to our deeper connection to the grander, more expandedness of self. It's just that we're here. You are in your body, I'm in my body, and we are figuring it out.
So you talk about your 3 jobs, which is helping people find the vocabulary, helping people learn how to carve out space, and helping people figure out they're part of something. If everything goes right in 10 years, what would that look like? What would be the world that you see? What would be Sage will be like? You'll be 55.
Oh my goodness.
I can't believe you're 45, by the way.
Yeah,
I
that's
really
what everyone
can't.
says. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel it. I feel 45. Actually, when I
You
was a
do?
child. Yeah. When I was a child, I felt old as a child. It's like, I've been here before. This is not new. What it will look like would be a more diverse human race. Meaning, the words that we have right now are not, I don't think, are able to encapsulate it completely, because I'm using diversity, and the reason why I had that deep breath is I'm like, diversity has been used to separate people, and I'm like, I don't like it. But what I mean by more diverse is that we're going to start to see humans show up as themselves, and that be the norm. And that the norm is that celebration of the wholeness of that beingness. I don't know what Sage will be in 10 years. I have a sense. I did when I first started transitioning, I did a past life regression because I needed to know. I mean, I had a different theory at the moment, but I needed to know what is going on. But I'm saying all that is because in that experience, I went to the future. And I had an experience of all the people that I've helped, the place that I had come to, the unity that we existed in. There was this connectedness I still feel today. There was this connectedness that was everywhere. The world was beautiful. And so when I'm still breaking down that experience. I've been putting effort into having that person show up. So that, like, setting the seeds for this unity, this oneness. But I think that sometimes when people say oneness, they're saying it as in the dissolution or the dissolving of the individual. And I'm saying oneness as this concept that is in support of the individual being a part of the one. And so I strive for that. I know it's hard to see it because all I can see is people separating themselves. But I think that's important. I think that this separation is happening now so that we can identify the identifier to reintegrate But we can't. How can we reintegrate? How can I integrate with a cisgender woman and not know her pain? It's like my roommate and I were talking about benefits, and I said, you know that people who menstruate should get off. That should be written in your benefits, because that's a part of your experience. There's nothing you can do about that. The world that we live in is forcing you to ignore the fact that you go through this thing when it's a part of your life. And if you need a time for yourself, you should be able to legally have time for yourself. And so how can we be one if a person who's pregnant has to choose between working and being pregnant? How can we be one if people who have children are required to have other people raise their kids because they got to go to work? How can we be one if we're not understanding the individual experience of the other? It's impossible. But we can't do that if I don't know my experience. We can't integrate if I'm not integrated. And so we're separating so that people can say, this is me. This is who I am. This is what informs this beingness. So that then we can go and say, it's like when I talk to people and they're telling me about their life, I'm like, trans people go through that every day. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you're telling me what you're describing is exactly my issue. You just don't realize that that's a trans person issue. And if you understood that, we would not have to discriminate against a person through ignorance. It's through awareness. So, when my roommate is having her menstrual cycle, it's not that I'm trying to cater to her, but I'm very aware. And so if she's saying like, oh, I can't do anything today, my initial reaction is good. Rest. You're going through a lot, lady. Don't do nothing today. Like, don't feel pressured to be a freaking producer when you can't. Like, just be. Like, do you need something? Are you good? Okay, you're good. All right, good. And what I find is when she's going through her menstruation, there's less conflict in the house. Because I'm not going to ignore that you're menstruating. You can ignore it if you want, but I'm not going to ignore that you're menstruating because I live with you, and it would be very strange for me to act like that doesn't go on. It's happening. It's like when she got pregnant, I would tell people my roommate is having a baby, and people were like, oh, you're so amazing, and I was like confused. But then I realized later, like, oh, well, I guess another person would think that something would have to change. For me, it's like, this is a human going through a human experience. Like, I've been around people who have babies my whole life. Like, I don't see the problem. It's just she's pregnant.
Yeah.
And I feel like that it grew our relationship in a way, because I'm not that kind of person to be upset over something that's human. And so in our household, I really tried to allow her and her daughter the fullness of their experience and be very present for what's happening. Because I believe in equality, and that can only happen if I'm aware of what's going on for the other. So that I can, because I, as a person who socializes as a male, there are things that I can do that she cannot do as a woman. I can wear whatever I want as a woman and not be judged for it. I have the option, whereas she doesn't have the option. And so I can be aware of that, and I can navigate this thing so that she never has to feel that she's a woman going through this thing by herself. Like, we are both women having different experiences, and that's okay.
The last question I was going to ask is, how do you measure the success of your life?
Okay. Woo. to move, to go from not expecting to live to move into surviving, and now the work is transforming that into thriving, that to me is success. Because I feel that, and I say that because Sylvia Rivera, I'm not going to cry, hold on, give me a moment, was a powerful trans woman, and she died homeless. She changed the world for me, and she died homeless. And knowing that, I had to be like, something has got to change, because my story is not going to be forgotten. My story is not going to be forgotten. I am not going to be forgotten. I am not going to allow this world to wash over me, and all people can remember is a person that I never was. So success to me will be, I've successfully survived. And now my plan is to shift that to thriving, to be a part of, to have friends, to have a family that I can go and talk to feel comfortable to talk to my parents, to my sister, to my grandmother, to shift all of that so that when I pass on, they're going to remember. And that when they talk to their future generations, they're really talking about me and not a bastardized version of what that is. If it wasn't for Sylvia Rivera making a stand during the Stonewall, and after all of that, starting organizations to liberate queer, trans, bisexual people, we wouldn't be here right now. Not that somebody else wouldn't have picked up the torch, but she did. And to see that she was not revered in life, she was not honored in life, that she had to struggle, that cannot be our narrative. And so success is me transferring my narrative to moving past into surviving, into thriving, into venerating, into elevation, into, I don't know what the next stage would be, but whatever it is beyond that is where I'm trying to go. That's success, and that's all that really matters. I don't really care about being a producer, producing things, because I know that if I thrive, that's the natural thing that's going to happen. If I elevate, it's a natural thing that's going to happen. If I'm venerated, it's going to be there. So I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to successfully pull myself out of all of this rigmarole into the flow of the cosmos, into the flow of the universe, and so that one day, maybe one of my students will be like, I remember Sage, and I remember Sage when Sage was a he, and she transitioned to she, and I remember how she grew into this person, and what she did for my life. That's success. So that I am remembered in the future generations, so that they can now have a foot to stand on that's not shaky, that's clear. That queer person did this.
Thank you so much, Sage.
Thank you.
I'm so happy and honored for you to join us today. And thank you for all of your thoughts, words, and action. It's some way contributing to the happiness.
Yes, my favorite prayer.
Because you say it every time.
I do. That's my favorite one.
Thank you so much.
That was amazing.
Thank you.